Messiah Yeshua applied himself to intercessory prayer. He was resigned to the crucifixion and was spending the night at his base in the cleft of the Mount of Olives called Gethsemane, waiting for Yehuda to arrive with the temple police to arrest him. Therefore I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with transgressors. And he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. Isaiah 53:12. This is a key verse. He was numbered with the transgressors. Ladies and gentlemen, you and I are those transgressors he was numbered with. My distress was bitter. In anxiety I cried, how faithless men are. I will take in my hands the cup of salvation and invoke Yahweh by name. I will pay my vows to Yahweh in the presence of all of his people. A precious thing in Yahweh's sight is the death of those who die faithful to him, says Psalms 116:10-5. Notice he's talking about the cup of salvation, uniquely one of the cups in the Passover meal. And he alludes to that and saying he was faithful. Even though his disciples were faithless, he was faithful. And as we were talking just a few minutes ago in one of the classrooms about death, precious in Yahweh's sight are the death of those who die faithful to him. However, he was not waiting passively at Gethsemane for his arrest. He was expecting an awesome miracle and the appearance of the glory of Yahweh. But this manifestation would depend on his own worthiness in drinking the cup and that of his disciples. Yeshua came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there. And he took with him Kepha and 2 sons of Sapphodi. And he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Stay here and watch with me. He went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. He said to Kepha, what? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. Listen to that. Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. Yeshua knows there is spiritual warfare going on that mountain. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were so heavy. So he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. And then he came to his Talmudim, his disciples, and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is come, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. He's already here. Matthew 26:36-46. Yeshua had not merely prophesied the coming of the kingdom of Yahweh. He had prepared for it. He had campaigned among the lost sheep of Israel, calling them to teshuvah, because he felt the coming kingdom was being held back by Israel's sins. The writings of the Pharisees often stress that Yahweh's promise to Israel are not automatically fulfilled. They depend on Israel's worthiness and cooperation. Consequently, even though Yeshua knew that the time was coming of the day of Yahweh was at hand, what was needed now was a last great effort of prayer. The belief in the power of prayer was very strong among the Pharisees, especially the prayer of a righteous prophet. He told his disciples, watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Messiah Yeshua was experiencing agony of sorrow about his approaching crucifixion. Being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground, says Luke 22:43-44. what our Messiah may have experienced was hematidrosis. Under great emotional stress of the kind our Messiah suffered, tiny capillaries in the sweat glands can break, thus mixing blood with sweat. What Messiah Yeshua prayed so earnestly for. Why did he tell his disciples to watch and pray? An injunction he had previously given to those waiting for the coming of the kingdom of Yahweh. Why did he warn them against entering into temptation? When you ask, do not receive. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures, James 4:3 says. But the fervent prayer of a righteous person avails much, or is very effective, says James 5:16. What might not be accomplished by the powerful prayers of a dedicated Messiah prophet, supported by a band of holy men, all concentrating their thoughts towards Yahweh at a time and a place appropriate for salvation. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Take heed, watch, and pray, for you do not know when the time is, says Mark 13:32 and 33. Notice he's saying, watch and pray. Only the most fervent beam of concentrated prayer directed from Gethsemane towards Yahweh could obliterate the traces of the sins of Israel and bring about the hour of redemption. Messiah Yeshua alone was not sufficient to fulfill Zechariah's prophecy, for he said, then you shall flee through my mountain valley, for the mountain valley shall reach to Azal. Yes, you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah the king of Judah. Thus Yahweh my Elohim will come, if all with thee be holy, says Zechariah 14:5. This explains why Messiah Yeshua narrowed his followers of over 70 to 12 and then to 3. He brought the ones that he best could rely on. The power of sinless prayer would be far more important than the brute force of mere numbers. They prayed so hard, he found them sleeping from sorrow, says Luke 22:45. They had literally cried themselves to sleep out of sheer exhaustion. Yeshua then stands in the cleft of the rock in the Garden of Gethsemane, with the craggy Mount of Olives looming over him like Mount Sinai above the children of Israel at the acceptance of the Torah. All that Yahweh has said we will do and hear, says Exodus 24:7. This is the valley of decision, the valley of the Lord's judgment. And he finally says, Father, not my will, but yours be done. He has chosen the moment well. The hearts of his prayer partners are set. His campaign and reclamation among the lost sheep of the house of Israel has been launched. The last battle fought. As he prays, he feels a sense of struggle. He wrestles in prayer like the sweat falls like great drops of blood to the ground. This is King Messiah Yeshua's Peniel. For he struggled with Yahweh and with men and has prevailed, says Genesis 32:28 and 30. The difficulty of his prayer would be overwhelming for anyone else, and he can see that the powers of his chosen companions are waning. With great sadness he realizes that the long travail of Israel has not yet come to an end. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Matthew 23:37. High priest Caiaphas, the Edomite Sadducean priest, and his father-in-law Annas, or Hanan the first, coming out of retirement to help in the conflict, both aristocratic power brokers despised by the Pharisees and the Essenes and the Zealots, send out the temple police to arrest Yeshua on grounds of blasphemy. Returning the third time, Yeshua said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough! The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Just as he was speaking, Yehuda, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the Torah, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Yeshua, Yehuda said, Rabbi, Rabbi, and kissed him. The men seized Yeshua and arrested him. Full of serene confidence, Yeshua takes the initiative and moves forward to meet his captors. When they state that they are seeking Yeshua of Nazareth, he replies, I am he. At this reference to his divine status, his captors drew back and fell to the ground. At the conclusion of this scene, Yeshua says confidently to Kepha, Shall I not drink the cup which the Father has given me? Therefore, throughout the Passion narrative, Yeshua remains in control of events. There is no distress or sadness. In the Synoptic Gospels, Yeshua is on trial. In John, it is his captors who are on trial. In John, Yeshua is not so much the man of sorrow as the King of glory. End of quote, says Graham in Staton in the Gospels in Jesus, the Oxford Bible Series. Listen to what Yeshua says. Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Says Mark 14:48. Then the detachment of troops and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Yeshua and bound him, and they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. John 18:12-13. High priest that year? We don't have high priests for a year. A high priest serves for a lifetime. Elohim is Yahweh, and he has given us light. Bind the sacrifice with cords to the horns of the altar, says Psalms 118:27. Every sacrifice was in a sense a type of Messiah, Yeshua. He was bound even as Isaac was bound to be sacrificed in Genesis 22:9. He was about to be offered as a sacrifice for Israel in all mankind. Between 1 a.m. and daybreak, Yeshua was tried before Caiaphas and the illegal council, acting as a Sanhedrin made up mostly of Sadducees and Yeshua's enemies among the scribes and Pharisees, and found guilty of blasphemy. You can see he was there in the Garden of Gethsemane. And then he was taken to Caiaphas' residence right here. And then from Caiaphas, where did Caiaphas send him? To Herod's palace. And then he was sent back to Caiaphas, and then Caiaphas sent him to Antonio's fortress where Pilate was. So you can see it was all in a small radius of the upper city, mainly. Listen to what the Babylonian Talmud says about these men. Woe is me for the house of Boetus. Woe is me for their club. Woe is me for the house of Hanan. Woe is me for their whisperings. Woe is me for the house of Caiaphas. Woe is me for their pen. Woe is me for the house of Ishmael. Woe is me for their fist. For they are the high priests. Their sons are the treasurers. Their sons-in-laws are the temple officers. And their servants beat the people with staffs. Does that sound like this setup against Yeshua was a family affair? Of illegal high priests, non-Aaronic, Edomites, from what is modern-day Jordan, says the Babylonian Talmud, Pesachim 57a. Appoint judges and officials for each of your tribes in every town Yahweh your Elohim has given you, and they shall judge the people fairly. Not the priests, the judges. Do not pervert justice or show partiality, Caiaphas and Ananias. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the innocent. Judah, follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. That's why Rome came and took their country away. Because they allowed evil men to judge when it wasn't their job to judge. It says Deuteronomy 16:18-20. These illegal priests then formed an illegal council. That was the Sanhedrin's job, not theirs. Where is justice in the land? The reputation of the Sanhedrin was to save, not to destroy life. The Sanhedrin, or the Supreme Court, consists of 70 plus 1 men, great Torah sages, who met in the Lishkat HaGazit, or the Chamber of Hewn Stone, adjacent to the temple in Jerusalem. During the time of Yeshua, Nicodemus, or Rav Nikodem Ben Gurion, was the chief justice of the Sanhedrin. It is said that a Sanhedrin that imposes the death penalty once in 7 years was considered a bloody Sanhedrin. But that ideal was jettisoned in the case of Yeshua before this illegal council, which met at night before an illegitimate priesthood, while members of the real Sanhedrin slept. Yeshua basically received 3 trials: a Jewish religious trial and 2 secular trials, one Herodian and the other Roman. The Jews were an occupied people. Only Roman courts had the right to execute anyone. The Jewish courts couldn't. The Jewish leader could condemn Yeshua to death, but they couldn't execute him. Whatever verdict they rendered in their religious trial had to be one recognized by the Romans. That is why there were so many trials. The Jews had to present the evidence from their trial to the Romans. Before they could execute Yeshua, the Romans needed to examine the evidence against Yeshua to determine if he indeed had committed a crime. So they took him to Antonio's fortress. Look how close it is to the temple and the chamber of hewn stone. Pilate questions Yeshua, personally asking him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" in Luke 23:3. Yeshua replies, "I am." For some reason, the high priest kept on heaping accusations against Yeshua, despite the fact that his sedition was clearly established by Yeshua himself. He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. Do not deliver me to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and such as breathe out violence, says Psalms 27:12. Ruthless witnesses have come forward. They question me on things I know nothing about, says Psalms 35:11. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimonies did not agree. And some rose up and bore false witness against him. Mark 14:56 and 57. Yeshua was presented to Pilate as a blasphemer, not as a blasphemer, but as a self-appointed king who would undermine Roman authority. Even stranger still, Pilate seems not to even care that Yeshua claimed to be the king of the Jews. He said, "I find no fault in this man," in Luke 23:4. Pilate wonders if Yeshua is even a threat. Do you answer nothing? See how many things they testify against you, Mark 15:4. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked if the man were from a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem for Passover at the time. Luke 23:5-7. Pilate made no charges against Yeshua and sends him to Herod Antipas. Then Herod saw Yeshua, and he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracles done by him. Then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and the scribes stood and vehemently accused him. Why did he not answer Herod? Because Herod was illegitimate. That was Yeshua's throne Herod was sitting on. Why should he answer an impostor? Then Herod with his men of war treated him with contempt and mocked him and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him back to Pilate, says Luke 23:8-12. Pilate took Yeshua and scourged him, and the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe. Then they said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him with their hands. Pilate then went out again and said to him, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him," says John 19:1-4. He hoped that this would satisfy their bloodlust. Wooden-handled leather whips with 9 strands called a cat o' nine tails were most frequently used. Each strand had a small piece of bone or metal attached to the end, which would chip and gouge out pieces of bone and tissue with each lash as it was withdrawn sharply backwards to the readied position. prisoner was tied across an object that would support his weight after he had lost consciousness. This position also provided easy access to areas of the legs, arms, thighs, and upper chest. Such an atrocity stripped the skin into long ribbon-like segments, causing profuse arterial bleeding. I gave my back to those who struck me, my cheeks to those who plucked out my beard. I didn't hide my face for shame and spitting, says Isaiah 50:6. Still, Pilate could find no charge against Yeshua, but the temple authorities persistently demanded crucifixion. Pilate, fearful of an insurrection, had one more maneuver. You have a custom that I should release someone to you at Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Then they all cried again, saying, Not this man, but Ben Abba. Now, Ben Abba was a zealot, says John 18:39 and 40. So which one? Both were messiahs. Ben Abba was the zealot Messiah. Yeshua was the King of the Jews, the lawful crown prince of the house of Israel. One was a terrorist, Ben Abba. The other one was a rabbi. If you had an occupational force holding a sword over your head, which one would you choose? I love Yahweh because He has heard my voice in my supplication, because He has inclined His ear to me. Therefore I call